Brothers and sisters of the Lifetime Athlete Tribe, you are the peeps who won't accept anything less than absolute peak human performance. You strive to be strong, fast, mobile, durable, successful, and happy as hell. Your intention is to be hard to kill and to die late, healthy, and fast in this journey. You recognize the human beast is born an athlete, and you know that only by embracing your inner beast and unleashing it will you unlock your full potential in every capacity of mind, body, and spirit. You are a lifetime athlete, and you are the reason for this podcast. The messages, products, and coaching services that we provide are here to help you kick ass at, in, and for life. So we're your hosts, Jay-Z and PK, and this is episode number 114. Howdy, PK.
Good morning, John. Good morning. I love the intro.
I was feeling it. And as we were talking before we went kind of on air, this is Monday morning, the day after switch over to daylight savings time. And, I woke up and I felt just a little bit less than the usual awesome. And I thought, well, I need to do something different. And so I took a hot bath, as hot as I could stand, and I headed outside for a walk in shorts and t-shirts at 30 degrees, and I steamed off my fog, if you will, and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, that is some hormesis. That's creativity. Did you or did you not have caffeine in your bloodstream when you came up with that idea?
Uh, I'm having it now. And
Yes. Okay, so this is pre-caffeine even. Wow,
well,
I'm just impressed. Color me impressed.
I've had a few sips, and I have a feeling that, things will start kicking ass at, in, and for life as a lifetime athlete as we go through the show today.
I love it. What are we talking about today?
Well, today's topic is another one of the physical therapy basics, physical therapy basics or PT basics shows. Today we're going to talk somewhat briefly, I think, about breathing strategies.
Yeah, I tell you what, I saw the the topic come through when you sent me the notes, and I was really curious what we're going to get into, and internally what I thought was, come on, John, how deep could this subject be? And just barely scanning the notes, as per usual, man on the street, I was not informed. This is a deep well, and it's interesting. PT basics, also known as wellness pearls, aka PT nugs. I'm ready to get into it today.
You're so awesome, man. It is my sheer unabashed pleasure. I have the audacity of saying that hanging out with you and chopping this stuff up, it's really one of the highlights of my week. You're awesome. Thanks, man.
Likewise here. Well, tell us why we're talking about breathing strategies today, first of all.
Well, everybody breathes, and some of us use breathing as an exercise. But how we breathe when we exercise can be one of those things that helps us to get a little more out of our bods, possibly recover faster, and even feel more awesome. It's pretty amazing when you look at breathing, how we can utilize it to do, get, or be a little more, perhaps.
Yeah, which is interesting, I guess, because it's also a function that happens, naturally. I don't know the right terminology, but it's just, you don't have to think about it. Your body does it. But if you do, and there's different types that you can use to really achieve more than just existence.
Yeah, and so I think the goal I had for today's show was to make it kind of workshopy, and so
Okay.
would ask you, PK, and the audience to just follow along as we bro coach it or broach our way through a couple of different breathing concepts.
I love it. Well, carry on. I will participate on this end.
Okay, feel free to stop me at any point as I have the tendency to get so passionate about these topics, as you know. But we want to look first at the basics of respiration. So breathing, everybody's going to say, well, yeah, it's instinctive and it's reflexive, and
Hmm.
everybody breathes. But in reality, many times during the day, for most of us, our breathing patterns can get dulled, if you will, by modern life, and we end up doing some very shallow ineffective breathing or can get into those patterns.
So what is it about modern life that does that? When you say modern life dulls it?
I would say it's probably two things come to my mind is kind of that sitting forward focused posture. So if we're
Mm,
sitting and we're driving, we're using a computer, looking at a phone, that what that tends to do is it tends to, collapse the sternum and bring us forward, and it actually blocks our ability to breathe optimally. But also, I think sometimes when we get pulled into some focus or some concentration, we almost subtly forget to breathe
mm,
deeply.
okay. Tracking.
Yeah, so you can kind of catch yourself doing that. Well, anyway, we should go over what the basic mechanics of breathing are really they're fascinating. They are to me, and I think I can make it so for everyone else. So if you're there and you're just being aware of your breathing as we have this discussion, first of all, as air as air enters the airway, it goes into the bronchi and down into the lungs. Well, um, we have a dome shaped muscle in our thorax, which separates our thoracic cavity from our abdominal cavity. So the heart and lungs are on the top part. The guts, if you will, the organs are on the bottom part. And so that diaphragm, as the air comes in, will contract downward. And so that dome will flatten downwards. And that's kind of the first thing that I would want to make everyone aware of is that in order to make room for the incoming air, the diaphragm essentially kind of contracts and gets out of the way.
Okay. You bet.
Then we've got the sternum or chest bone or breastbone. That's that armor plate in the front, and it's kind of there for an obvious reason to attach the ribs and protect the heart and lungs. But the sternum, when we inhale, so upon inhalation, it lifts up like a pump handle. Those old time, water pumps that you can
Yeah. Oh
picture,
yeah.
like at a state park or something. Well, when we breathe, the sternum is designed to expand upward and outward to allow again for this inhalation or expansion strategy to happen.
Gotcha. Okay.
Then the ribs behave like bucket handles, and so the you can picture a 5-gallon bucket, and it's got that handle that kind of lifts up. Well, the
Sure.
ribs do that in all directions. So this is multi-directional, but certainly we can picture it from the sides. As the rib cage is opening up and getting wider
Hmm,
and deeper.
okay. Sure. Sure.
Now, when all of those things happen, our visceral contents, our organs, guts, if you will, push downward, and the pelvis orients to kind of accept the descending guts, and our pelvic floor, which is muscular and has some elasticity, trampolines downward.
Nice. Nice use of trampolines.
Yeah, and then that's also driven by the base of our spine, the sacrum, and that sacral base will move posteriorly, and that's called counternutation, if you like that term. But all these things happen, every breath cycle. So when we inhale, all the things I just described occur, and then when we exhale, they reverse, and they're designed to happen automatically. But again, sometimes we can develop stiffnesses, postures, or habits that may make those things suboptimal.
Okay, got it. So stiffness leads to shallow breath because everything doesn't move around. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
following.
So with that first section there, I thought, oh, if we're just being aware of breathing, what happens, and you're taking a few breaths and you're creating, familiarity with these motions or things. Now, what I'd like to do is look at 4 ways to view breathing that certainly lifetime athletes are going to find useful and helpful in their training and lifestyle pursuits.
Absolutely. Gotcha. Let's do it.
Okay, number one is what some people and I will call parasympathetic breathing. So the idea with parasympathetic breathing is we're going to augment the autonomic nervous state known as rest and digest.
Okay.
So you feel free to follow along as we're doing this. I'll be your tour guide through parasympathetic breathing, and you can just participate and steep yourself in the richness of its tea.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm on the other end of this. I'm standing up and I'm ready to go through what you're gonna the workshop you're gonna take me through here.
Okay, so primarily we want to try to get nasal inhalation. Obviously, sometimes a person can be congested or have different uh, issues with their septum, but if we can do it, we want to inhale through the nose. So I'm asking you to start doing that and to do so with your tongue placed on the roof of your mouth just behind the front teeth. Try to even press the whole tongue up there to seal that off, and that just improves the ability to use the nasal component of the airway. Now, start to make your breathing slow and deep, or slower and deeper. And I want to say at this point, this is not just belly breathing. So, because of what we talked about earlier, we're really looking for that three-dimensional expansion and ballooning in all directions. And so, trying to only push out the belly or overemphasize that really is not the most effective way to do this. So we want to have that kind of relaxed swelling and shrinking of the beast. Now, start to take this slow, deep breathing and give it a box shape. So the first way that I'll suggest is to make things simple. Let's do a 4 count box breathing method. So as I explain that, you'll breathe in on a count of 4, hold on a count of 4, breathe out on a count of 4, and then pause prior to rebreathing for another 4 count. And just keep doing this as we're talking, and I'll give you some information about what's happening. Well, first of all, when we start to slow down and deepen and get that relaxed breathing going, you can use any quadrangular shape. The square 4 count box was just an easy one to visualize. But we're increasing the activation of the vagus nerve, that's our 10th cranial nerve, and also sensors in our neck known as carotid baroreceptors. Well, when we do that, we get this vascular relaxation, if you will, and it improves the oxygenation in our blood. We raise the serotonin or feel good neurotransmitter levels in the body, and we increase visceral blood flow or flow to our organs. Also, you'll lower one of your primary stress hormones, cortisol. You'll decrease your heart rate, your blood pressure, and your body temperature. And here's the most amazing thing about this parasympathetic breathing is as few as 6 cycles have been shown to have an effect. So as we're talking, I think you probably had the ability to get into just a calmer, more nourished, deep state. Couple things finally to add, and then I'll open it up for discussion. Is this is really the key to relaxation and meditation? So it's this type of breathing is a part of all of those practices. And anytime you hear a person say, "Oh, wait a minute, just take a breath or breathe for a minute," this is really true that we can help our bodies to get back into the calm state. So this is very useful, say, for an athlete post big workout to kind of uh, right away get started with the recovery process, come down quickly. Another thing is, this is really one of my observations. This type of breathing focus is useful in very intense efforts. It may require a faster cycle and mouth inhalation, but if you've ever, like, say, done any kind of prolonged output exercise, like you're really cranking on the bike or you're running a hard mile, again, there's lots of other examples. That actually is kind of like a stressor to the body. There's a perceived stress where a person who isn't aware of kind of being their own inner firewalker with breathing will start doing what I call panic panting. So they start to, and ultimately they're not oxygenating well, and they end up, tying up and having to slow down. Whereas the person who's experienced and skilled says, okay, I know this is hard, but I'm going to use a variation of that, just kind of like, and it's focused where you're trying to intentionally um, breathe as hard as you have to, but as calmly as you can. And so that's really a cool trick. And I do see a lot of trainees that they'll shift into panic mode and ultimately decrease their performance simply by not accessing this technique.
John, very interesting. Very interesting. As I've been trying to do this, as you've been walking us through it, couple things, uh, questions, I guess, like the idea of filling up the belly. That seems intuitive, but the idea that we have a balloon inside that's volume, and I don't know if I just kind of put my hands on my ribs as I was kind of seeing if I was also getting, you know, expansion in all directions. And you can kind of feel those ribs expand a little bit as you're doing it. Um, do you have any tips for sort of filling up the entire cavity, or what to think about, or, like a physiological, how do you know when you're actually filling it all the way up?
Yeah, I think the key is actually to relax and let it happen, and in
Okay.
most cases, it will. Again, some people will have some restrictions that may need to be addressed, but the one thing we want to avoid is what's called an apical breathing pattern, where you're using what are known as accessory muscles of respiration. So a lot of those muscles that are up in your neck and chest, and you can kind of feel like,
Mm.
person's straining to get air in, and so they're pulling up and increasing tension, which is sort of working against this thing. And so we want to have
Mm.
that, let that filling and expansion happen, but we're not forcing it. And I think that's really the art form with practicing this. It's certainly one of the keys to many meditative
Interesting.
interventions.
How does it breathing like this lower your body temp?
It kind of gets into all those things we were talking about when you start to use terms like rest and digest, because you
Sure.
get that vasodilation, and so then things um, we actually have more heat dissipation through the extremities, because the vessels relax, and the body can allow that energy to flow out, as opposed to, say, being in a more fight or flight or stressful thing where we're trying to hold energy in, because again, fight or flight is coming.
So would that mean that you're lowering your body temp by pushing that heat? Like it, are you going to sweat then, or not sweat per se, but is it going to be? Are you going to feel cooler, or is it just going to start the process of sort of, I guess, releasing that heat?
Yeah, actually, over time, your core temperature will trickle downward, and
Interesting.
it's almost like the same thing. If you're on a really hot day and you're feeling some form of heat stress, hopefully not serious,
Sure.
but even if it's transient, okay, you go lay in the shade under a tree, and the body, the human beast is brilliant. It's an animal. You'll do this, and you'll lay
Huh.
there, and you'll try to get calm and cool down, and that's how you do it.
John, that's beautiful. I like that. Very, very nice tone in your voice as you were guiding us through the exercise and meditation. Okay.
It's an interesting thing, whether you're doing it or talking about it or thinking about it, it does, the body, the human beast is brilliant, it just does these things. We just have to take the brakes off.
I love it. Well, that's our first nug for the day. Are we ready to move on to our second exercise in the workshop?
Yeah, so now we're gonna switch gears, and hopefully I'll ramp up my, speech and intonation, but we're going to look at sympathetic breathing, and there are different names for this as well, but this is when we want to facilitate the sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system and achieve those amped and ramped states, or even just think of it as fight or flight. And so in a real crisis, that's going to drive automatically, but sometimes in a training situation we can contrive this.
Got it. Okay. For example, if you're, what would be a big effort that you'd want to employ this methodology before?
Yeah, listen, it's when you need to get up, and so you got to get up for something. And that's a great Van Halen song, by the way. But Um, and sort of like you want to withstand the pain, and research shows that your tolerance to discomfort will go up in the
Oh,
presence of this central nervous system state, and it makes total sense, because again, if you've got to flip a burning car, everything's on, and you know how I'm saying. So actually, like the flip a burning car workout model would be, okay, you're going to do, you're trying to get like an AMRAP, max number of
yeah.
repetitions
Yeah.
for push-ups or something like this. Um, you're getting psyched up for a sprint, or you're going to dunk, or whatever. I mean, I think that
Sure.
you'll catch people doing this automatically, and of course, this also is part of what's been made very popular over the last few years, although humans have done it for 2 million years, is the Wim Hof method. So Wim Hof, the Iceman,
Hmm.
he promotes this for various health benefits, and uses it to dive under the polar ice cap, and swim. Although I'll talk about that in a minute. And so now I think what I want to do is not ask everybody to do this ahead of time, allow me to tell you a few things about it, and then you can try it at your own discretion. I just want to
Got it.
keep things
Got it.
safe, you know.
Okay,
So
sure.
so here we are. Really, what we're talking about is doing a series of rapid, moderate breaths. Maybe not max depth, but certainly not too shallow. Through however we can move the air most quickly. So probably using the nose and the mouth. Most of the inhalation could come through the nose, but to quickly exhale, we might want to use the mouth. Again, some variance there. Um, we want to have an emphasis on exhalation. And really what's happening is we're quote unquote blowing off CO2, or we're exhaling carbon dioxide fairly rapidly. So that's the key. Well,
Okay.
what this does is it quote unquote alkalizes or increases the alkalinity of the blood. So by blowing off that carbon dioxide, we're actually reducing the hydrogen ion content in our blood, and it's less acidic. Uh, Doing this also has an interesting component because it adrenalizes or increases adrenaline in the body, and that affects both the peripheral tissues and the CNS. And if you want to use deeper stuff, you can say at the brain we call that norepinephrine, and out in the body epinephrine. But you can say adrenaline, and I think most people relate to that better.
Okay. Absolutely.
So what's going to happen when we do a cycle of this type of thing, which I'll show you like a little modified protocol for it in a moment,
Hmm.
is we're going to improve reaction time. We're going to increase muscle recruitment, and also we're going to dull down pain tolerance. And all those things happen with this breathing cycle, and again, how it changes neurotransmitters in the body to basically just be able to temporarily produce or take a big effort.
So by temporarily, how long? What's that time frame that you'll get these effects for?
I am not sure if the literature is definitive on this one, because I mean, you look at this, some of this is used by free divers, for example. And so um,
Sure.
you can you can probably just generically say anywhere from a few seconds to possibly a couple minutes.
Got it. Okay. So if like I was imagining a mountain bike downhill racer, if they had, if they did this before and the runs are like between 1 and 2 minutes, it could potentially they could reap the benefits for that.
Yeah, 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 totally. And there's
Okay.
some cautions I'll bring up really quickly, or in a moment. I guess I don't need to do that right away. But
Sure.
here's really quickly. Here's the thing: we're going to take 20 or 30 quick breaths with
Mm-hmm.
with an emphasis on the emptying component. And so, if
Okay.
I'm going to get away from the microphone, I'll just kind of demonstrate. It's like that's how you do it. So in doing that, we're going to start to blow off that CO2. And then one of the techniques that's a really cool trick is you follow that with one breath hold at the end on basically on empty lungs until you have a strong urge to rebreathe. And what that does is it allows for a small amount of hypoxia or low oxygen in the bloodstream to register in the body, and it increases that adrenaline output.
Got it. So it sounded like when you were demonstrating, you were going in through the nose and then out, emptying through the mouth. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, that's why I hesitated earlier. There's certainly, arguments out there that everybody is designed to uh, nasal breathe, and we can do it up to about
Sure.
70% of maximum output. But modern humans and what's happening in our gene pool, with respect to um, mouth and maxilla shape, nasal cavity shape, that's not as easy
Sure.
for some of us. And so, yeah, but if
Sure.
you can do it, great. If you have to just go with the mouth, like, fine, it's going to work. So,
Got it. Got it. And John, I'm just sort of trying to paint a picture for what you were, there's qualifiers and all that. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, this is interesting. And I think that you do on the last, so if you got 30, you hold your breath and until you have that strong urge to breathe, and you're getting some additional adrenaline out of that.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and it's, yeah, you've seen people do this all the time. They're like,
Sure.
especially in workouts. Like they're coming up to the line, or they're going to do a lift or something, and sometimes a yell also helps. And anything that again is activating the sympathetic nervous system. So you'll see people like, hold on, I'll get away from the microphone. They're like. and it's like, yeah, I mean, that works. And then maybe, how about slapping the face a couple times, maybe, slap the legs. That shit rocks, man. I'm telling you.
I love it. I love it. I want to okay, if you do this and you're like, let's say at your gym and you're just getting ready to get a lift going on, like your standard box gym and you get this going. I want a description right into John at thelifetimeathlete.com for the reaction of your compatriots in the gym who are just hitting the treadmill watching reality TV. Wow, that's great.
Right. Well, if I was to say that, like, if it's powerlifting gym, they're doing it all the time. Maybe like people who are like serious bodybuilding as well. You'll see this sometimes even in the CrossFit box. Not so much in the Globo gyms with a lot of machines and the clientele's a little more tame. But you'll even see like the power of the human beast. The tribe, the clan. It's like, okay, now I'm backing away. So everybody's into it. So you're going like. But everybody's like, come on, let's go, and it works. It totally works.
There's absolutely, I'm only laughing because the performance is amazing, but it has to work because when when you're not thinking about it, this is what, like let's say you did have to move a tree or, this is the whatever burning car, mom lifting a fridge off of a kid. That's how it actually works, tapping into that those deep ruts in our evolution.
Totally,
Fascinating, John.
it's go
Beautiful.
time. And so one last caution is do be
Sure.
careful.
Mhm.
If you're going to do like a max lift, you may not want to take this too far, and certainly avoid. Despite what Wim Hof does, don't do this underwater. Your life could be at risk. And so, mention that. You can look on YouTube. There's lots of supposedly funny, although I find them a little bit disturbing videos of people doing squats and deadlifts and passing out, falling over, and sometimes hitting their head on metal. I'm not so keen on that. Um,
Mm.
and also Wim Hof, the Iceman, he did at one time have to be rescued because he blacked out swimming under an ice cap. And so, we want to use this intelligently and not less necessarily put ourselves at
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I mean Wim Hof, he is living on the edges, just swimming under an ice cap, uh, just under normal circum. In any case, I
Yeah.
think that's good, prudent advice. But I'm interested to try, and if you do try this, let us know how it goes. Are we going to move on to nug number 3?
Yeah, and I'll kind of preview them. So we talked
Okay.
now about just like using kind of repetitive breath cycles to either facilitate a calming down or parasympathetic effect, valuable. Also using one for psych up, which we just went over. Now you can also use your breathing patterns to either facilitate stability in the body or to facilitate mobility. And so, if we want to go
Mm,
first into what I would call stabilization breathing, again, it's going to be familiar for most folks. We're going to talk about ways that we can maximize stability in our physiologic and mechanical system when it's needed.
I love it. Keep going.
So, really, what stabilization breathing is, it's briefly holding the breath with a maximum compression, and also a contraction of muscle throughout the body. And you can do this at any point in the breath cycle, but it tends to work best with fairly full lungs.
Okay.
So now we can also, people can just kind of cruise along and experiment with this. Think about when they've done it, but also practice. Well, by taking a breath in and just sort of bearing down on that, sometimes called Valsalva maneuver, um, what we're doing is we're increasing the intrathoracic and intra-abdominal pressure in the body. So, by basically tightening against that filling, we're like a soda can that hasn't been opened. It's pretty strong. You can push on the sides and it's very rigid, as opposed to when it's open and again there's no compression. It's fairly flimsy. So we want to pressurize internally. That's the first thing that happens with a stabilization breath hold. The second thing is we typically, again, we're wired to do this. We will tighten most of our muscles, particularly those around the trunk and hips, and that creates what's called a tensioning of musculotendinous guy wires. And so just like a circus tent, with those lines, we crank on those and we just make the beast more rigid.
Okay. So, John, I want to make sure that I'm understanding here. We're taking in a breath, and then our body is naturally flexing, or we are contracting in it. I don't know.
Sure, I can explain.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Please do.
it's two things, So we're holding against our breath, So we're holding the breath, and so that's kind of that internal tensioning, and then it's isometric. So we can do this in any body position, So you could be flexed or extended or rotated or side bent or you name it, but you're clenching muscles isometrically, and so the lats are pulling on the pelvis, and the abs
Mm-hmm.
are doing
Mm-hmm.
so, and connecting ribs to pelvis, and all, multiple muscles have have roles in this, and so that's those two things together.
Got it.
we're
Got it.
we're pushing out from within with our internal pressure, and we're pushing back against it with our muscles, and the end
The very
result.
process of holding the breath is doing both of those.
Yeah, yeah, and again,
Yeah,
it's
got it.
it's
Okay.
instinctive, but we can
Sure.
also, in an exercise or training capacity or competition, we can do it a bit more purposefully and forcefully. And what happens when we do this is we do what's known as lower movement variability. And this can be good because you don't, if you're under a heavy load, for example, with a squat or a deadlift, you don't want mobility, you want stability. And so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you want to decrease those degrees of freedom and make the body rigid and stronger and more stable, but also more safe, against tissue damage.
Interesting. Okay. So this, yeah, gotcha. Tracking.
So how one would do this, you'll see a person, like, say, on a fairly heavy lift, for example, they may actually do kind of a slow, prolonged grinding lift, and they may exhale, as they're pushing through the latter part of that. So it could be through pursed lips, or it could even be, open with a scream. Sometimes you'll see this, but again, you can see it that way. The other way, though, it's very interesting, is, let's say you're not going to square up and lift something. And anytime you ask a person to do this, like if you said, hey, square up and lift that sack of whatever, the chair, whatever, they'll automatically do this. They'll get, tensed up, and they'll be, you know, again, the person doesn't have to have that much athletic experience because these are instincts in the beast. But if I come back and say, well, now you start to, if you appreciate this, you start to watch basketball, like, I know you're a big NBA fan. And so, this is happening in a rapid and pulsatile manner all the time. Anytime an athlete makes a cut or a jump or a reach, they will quickly do this to get more stability. Then they can relax and accelerate through space.
Really? So if you did the slow mo before, like a backdoor cut, there was a short holding of the breath right before making that movement to push the body against and stabilize.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's
Wow.
like if you're just standing, and listening to this, and I said, "Hey, I want you to just sort of like totally relax everything, get kind of floppy jalopy, let your tongue hang out, and now try to jump up and down just like an inch off the floor." It's like, no, it's not that easy. Now, if I said, get tense and tight and make this spring, elastic and powerful, it's like boing, boing, boing. You're like, holy crap, it actually works.
That is fascinating, John. I bet there are some video illustrations of this out there to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's not that many videos of people actually saying, "Okay, now watch what the breath's doing," but there's
Sure.
probably 17 million videos of people doing various athletic things, and you can see them do that stabilization breath hold just before the big impulse.
Wow. Wow. Interesting.
So here's a thought for you. You can practice this, like doing, say, any number of things. But like I mentioned, the jump. You can also do like push-ups or bench press with this technique. And but obviously, technique with those movements involves lots of things. But anytime you make that stability and rigidity go up, your absolute force goes up, and your time to fatigue will typically be extended a little bit.
Fascinating, John. Love that.
Okay, so I'll hit this last one. Just ways to increase
Sure.
efficiency in our beast, and this is mobilization breathing. And again, I think people know this one. Um, this is a conscious effort to allow the body to relax, the muscles in particular, and even the joints, in association with inhalation.
Okay.
So the axial skeleton, so that's our, uh, uh, vertical, spine down through the legs, the axis that we're working through. It unlocks as we inhale, which is known as an expansion strategy. We talked about that. So you can even
Hmm.
think about the skeleton has to unlock to allow those movements we talked about earlier to fill up with air. So it works until you get to obviously max filling where we're hitting the wall that way. And movement capacity is maximized. And so it's a really interesting thing when you're trying to reach into a shelf overhead,
Hmm.
or doing a stretch like a side bend and reach type movement. If you practice doing it, say either with an exhale or with held breath, you won't go as far. But if you relax and reach as you're inhaling, you'll go further. And it's just really, really an interesting thing, just a trick to know when you need it. And so,
Hmm.
um, just like to keep these in our toolbox.
Absolutely. That's fascinating.
Okay, so now we've done the breathing. We've talked about parasympathetic breathing, sympathetic breathing, stabilization breathing, and mobilization breathing. And again, just having that awareness can help all of us to get a little bit more out of our exercise and training and use that strategically. Hopefully, not when we have to flip burning cars, but even when we're working in the garage or you name it. But the question that you're probably going to ask me is, well, what's the best thing to wear when I'm practicing these amazing breathing techniques?
I- yes. I mean, it was on the tip of my tongue, John.
I'm sipping a coffee. Hold on. Mm. Okay, so here's what we need. Of
Uh-huh.
course, the thing to wear anytime you're doing any of these awesome things as a magnificent human beast and a member of the Lifetime Athlete Tribe is official TLA workout gear. Yes, that's right. The store is up and running, folks, and the fam is gearing up for spring with shirts, t-shirts, hoodies, uh, long sleeves, coffee cups, water bottles, socks, and hats, and a few more things. And it is, if you take my word for it, awesome.
Yes, and so it is the thing to wear when practicing breathing. So if you think about it, when like from the top, it's any and every moment of every day. This is the gear to wear.
That's what I'm talking about. So in unisex, we have basic tees, classic
Hmm.
hoodies, baseball tees, bringing back a classic in both cotton and blends. For women's fashion, we have racerback tanks, fitted t-shirts, and more. And for the guys, there are specific physique enhancing cuts in several models.
Hmm. Dynamite.
There's also dry fit workout gear for tech wicking excellence. Okay, well,
I have no comment on dry fit. It's a great fabric.
yeah, sure. So, really, this is the deal. You get to display proudly your membership in the Lifetime Athlete Tribe. That you are and will always be hard to kill. And as a fit animal, a human, you are unleashing your beast and unlocking your athletic potential. And all those things, there's varieties of different logos and statements on the merch. And it's really easy to find. All you have to do is go to thelifetimeathlete.com, hit the shop menu item, and you're there. And doing so really helps to support the podcast and some of the other resources that we have, hundreds of free materials for folks to, again, kick ass at in and for life. And also, we want you to be a part of this tribe. So if you need something for spring, it's just in time. Really appreciate you taking a look at it and grabbing something. And hey, join the revolution.
Absolutely. You need something to grunt, shout, growl, sweat in. It's perfect.
Yeah, and flip burning cars. Oh,
uh,
awesome.
if you're still with us, if you could give us a rating or review on whatever platform you listen to the podcast on, it would really help. 5 stars, we'd love them. Yeah, John, I want to thank you today. You really blew my mind with this breathing strategy nug fest that we worked our way through today.
The Nug Fest. You're like Billy Gibbons, ZZ Top. I want to thank you.
I am.
Oh,
I
good
sure
enough.
am.
Good enough, guys. Hey, thanks again. Thanks, PK. Catch you next time.